We're continuing our series from the West Michigan Quilters Guild Quilts on the Grand 2016 show. The next demonstrator is me. I'm going to do a demo on Appliquilting. And today I want to talk to you about Appliquilting. So we have appliqué and quilting. So in this case, it's going to be machine appliqué and free motion quilting. All right, so we're going to start with the first quilt, which is in the garden. It's a quilt designed by Adita Sitar, and on that quilt, all of those flowers were freehand cut with just glue stick on the back. So I finished the base of the quilt and then started cutting out flowers. Some of them I traced from Adita's pattern. Some of them I just went outside, looked at my garden, and thought I could make that. So the leaves were literally just cut with scissors. Then I took a water-soluble, acid-free glue stick, put some on the back of the leaf, and stuck it down till I had all of them in place where I wanted them. Then I put my backing and my batting together, and I went to my sewing machine, and I started quilting. Now, with a small quilt like that, the glue stick is going to hold great. You're not going to have any problem with things falling off because it was a small quilt. It wasn't like I was going to be handling it and folding it and twisting it, turning it so much. So I love doing that idea. It's the same way that I did this quilt. This is a double wedding ring quilt. And when I got done with the double wedding ring, it hung in the store, and at the store there was a big rain, which led to water problems, and the quilt actually got water damage on it. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it then. It had these rusty stains coming on down. My mother had actually painted me some fabrics, and I thought one way that I could cover up the water damage on the quilt was to put some appliqué on it. The quilt was already quilted at that point. So I took the fabrics that my mother had painted, and I just freehand cut out petals and leaves. And one flower at a time, I would lay down the petals, the leaves, again using a glue stick. Then I went to my sewing machine, and I free motion quilted with invisible thread those flowers down. So it was appliqué and quilting. So I went all the way around the quilt that way. Now it's beautiful. Everybody loves this quilt. With the water stains, it wasn't so happy. This is another quilt. Now this is a design by Jennifer Jangles. These owls are absolutely adorable. And when I'm doing this quilt, I would know that someday it'll go to a little kid. So I really kind of wanted it to be extra soft. And sometimes with the fusibles, you know that it'll get a little bit stiff, those fusibles, in the different layers. So with this quilt, I used a product called 606. 606 is a product by JT Trading, and it is a spray fusible. So I took the back of the pieces, I turned it over to the back, and I sprayed it with 606. You let it rest for a little while, and then it fuses down just like Wonder Under. It's not going to hold as good as Steam-A-Seam or Heat and Bond, but it holds pretty well. So I was able to stick those down using the stick 606. Now the one disadvantage to doing the free motion without any fusible, so something like just the glue stick or the 606, when you're quilting it, when it's washed, it will fray a little bit on the edges. I'm okay with that. It doesn't bother me in the least. This particular quilt, I just thought they even looked extra cute because they're fluffy. On the double wedding ring quilt, if those flowers got a little fluffy on the outside, score! Another embellishment. But when it's going to be something that might be washed a lot, on this quilt, I actually did 2 lines of quilting. So first I quilted near the edge of the design. Then I did another line of quilting about 1/4 inch away. And my thinking there is when this does go to a little child and it gets washed a bunch of times, that it'll be able to be washed, and yet it will hold up really well because I did that double line of stitching. These are designs from Alex Anderson. These are her Celtic alphabet. Now, I've done lots of videos on doing the bias bars and making Celtic work, but I wanted to show you what these can look like. This was all laid down with the Roxanne's glue. I had my backing, my batting, and my quilt top done, glued these down. Then I took it to my sewing machine and I did my small zigzag with my invisible thread all the way around. So on a quilt like this, that was not that hard. I just was spinning it around using the zigzag. It wasn't done free motion, so I had my walking foot on, just moving it around on my machine. So I was appliquing and quilting at the same time. Now when you get a chance and you look here, you can see these tiny little zigzag stitches. So it was appliqued and quilted for a quilt like this. Then I decided to go bigger. And on the bigger one, I thought I'll do the same thing. I'll use, my background, got my batting, backing, and top all prepared. I've got my bias strips prepared. And then I was going to take it to my machine to do the invisible machine applique. This was not fun. I would never do this again. It was such a pain to spin this around because of the size of the quilt, to get around these little inside curves using my invisible machine applique stitch. So I would not recommend that you do any quilt this size using the invisible machine applique stitch. The other quilts I'm going to show you, there's some big ones, but they were actually done with the free motion stitch. So the next quilt behind me is the star. Now a lone star is a beautiful pattern. Everybody wants to make a lone star. But when you're going to finish a lone star, if the background fabric that you use in your setting squares and triangles, you've got your options. You can put a real fabulous fabric there because it's a big square, fabulous fabric. It's going to make the quilt look fabulous. Or if you just put a simple cream-colored fabric there, it's going to look rather boring. So you've got, I believe, two choices. Choice one is to quilt it with some really cool feathered leaves or an awesome design that is going to bring design to that blank square. Option two, applique. Now whether or not it be done hand applique first or a traditional machine applique, any sort of applique to fill the spaces. With this quilt, I decided to use my appliquilting technique. So I used the dies over here that are from Westminster, which is a product or a designs from Sizzix, Big Shot. They also make machines for paper crafting. Well, they came out with some dies for making some flower petals. So I used my Steam-A-Seam 2, which I'll take you through step by step here in a little bit. I fused it onto the back of the fabric, then I ran it through those dies. And when you're doing that, you can cut out 4 to 6 at a time. So I had plenty of flower petals to use creating my design. Then I fused them all down and then took it to my machine and started quilting. So I was appliquilting the design down on the setting squares and triangles. The quilt behind me is called Rose of Sharon. That's a quilt that was designed by Sharon Pedersen, and she had AccuQuilt design a die specifically for her. So that die is this one here. And the die came with many different flower sizes, leaf sizes, circles, all the elements that I needed for working on this large quilt. Now I just told you a little bit ago that doing an applique, a zigzag stitch or a blanket stitch on a large quilt to go around all those corners, not fun. This quilt was done block by block. So I layered one block of fabric, the backing, the batting, and the quilt top. All the design was on it. Then I went to my sewing machine and I did my blanket stitch on my sewing machine, going around one block at a time. Then I followed a lot of the basic block by block or quilt as you go techniques that I've been teaching for a long time. You have to find just the right technique to work for you, but that's how I did this. So yes, it does have all those traditional applique stitches, and I did appliquilt it, but I only did it one block at a time. There's no way I would have done this big of a quilt appliquilting with it being so large. So this is the Rose of Sharon by Sharon Pedersen. Then we can move on to freehand. So why do you need to have a die? You don't need to. I showed you those flowers that I just cut out freehand. This particular sample I haven't quilted yet, but I've got my really fabulous hand-dyed sky fabric, and I took my brown fabric, I put a fusible on the back of it. So I had a large piece of brown fabric with fusible, took my rotary cutter mat and ruler and just freehand cut into the shapes of the trees. I even freehand cut the leaves. I stacked 2 or 3 fabrics with fusible together, and I just rotary cut a leaf out. It's a leaf. Never met a perfect one. They're always going to be different in shape, so it's okay. Just iron them down. Someday I'll finish with the leaves and I'll actually quilt it. I thought it'd be fun on this to actually put family names on it and maybe make it a family tree kind of thing. On this quilt is the idea of taking a very traditional quilt pattern or really easy quilt pattern and making it really fabulous by using appliquilting. So on this quilt, we have a half square triangle right here. Large half square triangle. I think it's 9 inches. That's called fast. You get your quilt top done fast. And then I added these leaves to it. Now, I cut these leaves, I'm pretty sure 15 years ago, using Steam-A-Seam 2 on the back of it. It was before there was AccuQuilt, before there was Sizzix, before there was the Brother Scan and Cut to help you cut these all out. I cut them all out by hand. Never going to do that again. That's just not fun. But it did hold up all this time. Now, it's not quilted. I will get my backing, my batting, and get the top on it, and I will quilt it at some point, but it's ready to be quilted. One of the really popular techniques nowadays is using pre-cuts, using jelly rolls and charm packs and big sandwiches and big cakes and I don't know, all the different names that they call those pre-cuts. And when you take a quilt like that, you know, if you finish it the way they say, oh, just put the squares together, it'll be wonderful, and it will be. But wouldn't it be better to make it even more wonderful? So on a quilt like this wasn't done with jelly rolls, but it's that idea. I've just taken different fabrics, I've pieced them together on the angle, I've got sky all the way down to grass. What do you think I will put on that quilt? I'll cut out flowers and stems and leaves, and I'll make myself an entire garden on this background, and then I'll quilt it. Here's one using the idea of the charm packs. So you take those charm packs and you assemble the entire background, and it would be a very happy quilt with any little child you know. But now, the idea of adding something special to it. So I cut these flowers out using my Scan and Cut. The Scan and Cut is a machine by Brother that you can create your own designs, make them bigger, smaller, any size you want, and it's going to cut out one shape at a time. The advantage with that is that you can have all the creativity you want. You're not restricted by what the companies are making in dies. You're able to make any design you want. So I created this design with the Scan and Cut. Cut out my base fabrics and layered them all together. I talked earlier about how stiff it can be if you layer lots of them together. So on such a large flower as this, I cut out the large flower. I'm sorry, first I had my fabric for the purple large flower, and instead of covering the entire background with my fusible, I just covered the outside edges of the square. So when it cut it out, there was no fusible on the inside because I knew I was going to layer a couple of other pieces to it. So I've gone with the 3 layers in this case all the way up to the circle. Now, having said that, this really is not that stiff. It's only been washed one time. Right here in the middle is 2 layers of fusible right to the middle, and it's not that stiff. Right? As long as you're not using, you know, Heat and Bond Ultra is one of those that is really stiff. That's what it was created for. That was its intent in life, to be really stiff so you could shape dimensional flowers. But if you use Steam-A-Seam Light or Heat and Bond Light, those are going to hold pretty well, and they're not going to be too heavy on your quilt. On this quilt, I took a charm pack of batik fabrics and I pieced it all together and put my border on it. I layered my layers together. So I have my backing, my batting, and my quilt top. I used the 505 basting spray to keep my layers together. I like using 505, and really the trick to using 505 is to not use too much. If you use too much, your needle will get sticky. If your needle gets sticky, then you can use some silicone. So that's silicone spray. That is from Sullivan's. And you can spray a little bit on your fingers and rub it up and down on your needle, and it will keep your needle from getting the sticky on it. You also can put it on the surface of your sewing machine, so it will actually slide really well too. So I've got my layers all together, and I did one line of stitching right here on the border to hold everything in place, and another line of stitching at the very edge of my quilt, so that when I am quilting it, this little border is not going to get pushed into the inside. So those are the straight lines of my quilt that are now secure. Now I'm going to take my appliques. These are appliques that I cut out with the Sizzix, one of the Sizzix dies, and I'm just going to position them down however I like them. Peeling off the back, sticking them down. These are actually done with the Steam-A-Seam. And the thing I like so much about Steam-A-Seam, not only is it very lightweight, but you can actually hold this. This could be on your design wall. And because it's done with Steam-A-Seam, which actually has that sticky on the back of it, it won't fall off. So if you're working with the design wall, you can set this on the wall and be sticking your pieces, changing your mind, sticking it someplace else, doing whatever you want to do. Now I'm going to go to my ironing board. And the trick to using Steam-A-Seam is patience. If you don't have patience, you're not allowed to use Steam-A-Seam. This is how it works. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Are you all bored silly yet? You must fuse it completely. If you don't fuse it with a lot of patience, the pieces will not stick. So you need to read the package. Well, this is cotton fabric, so I'm not really worried about it. I think I'm up to number 25 now, and it's still not going to burn my fabrics, and those fusibles are going to stay. I'm going to let this cool as we go to the sewing machine. So I've got my sewing machine set up with my acrylic table. Really important if you're doing any free motion quilting that you have an acrylic table or you have your machine set down into a table so that you're going to have a nice big flat surface. On this machine we have the Supreme slider. This is a Teflon coated piece that adds to the acrylic table, so it's got a kind of a rubber here that will keep it in place, and it's very slippery. So when I put my quilt on this, it's going to slide around with no problem. Other things you can use are like the silicone spray, where if you put that silicone spray on there and rub it all in there and buff it, it's going to give you a really nice slippery surface to work on. I'm using my thread in a thread stand. I like to buy bigger cones of thread, so I like to use a thread stand. This is going to be a very sturdy thread stand, not the plastic ones that are going to tip over, but the heavier one with the metal base. I've got my machine set up to free motion quilt at this point. I would normally put some gloves on or some licky tack. There's a product that you just put on your hands. Makes your hands kind of feel like a Post-it note, so it's really easy to hold on to your quilt. And then I'm going to quilt. So now we're going to free motion the leaf. So when you're doing this, you want to try to stay near the edge of the applique that you're working on. going all the way around the edge. I'm maybe 1/8 of an inch away. And then just because I'm here, I'm going to give it a little stem right down the middle to make it more interesting. Now this is Appliquilting. So that's the applique. Well, then I would get inside here and do some quilting, whatever design I choose to do. I come over, here's another one to be appliqued. So again, I'm just going to go up the edge. Now, you might want to do lots of different colors, which is always going to make a quilt more interesting if you use more threads. Or you can just use one thread. You could use invisible thread or one unifying color for the entire quilt. Get to the end with some tiny stitches and cut my thread. I've been doing appliquilting for probably 15 years now, and I started appliquilting just to get things done. I was working in a store and I had to make so many different samples all the time. I just needed to get them done. And it's turned out to be one of my favorite techniques. It's also an acceptable technique if you're having a quilt judged. The Star Quilt did really well in the show 2 years ago, and it was all done appliquilted, and the judges knew it. It's not like just because it's hand applique are the judges going to give you credit. They're going to give you credit for workmanship, and appliquilting is going to be just as creative as doing any hand applique. So I hope you enjoyed this, and you might give appliquilting a try. Well, here's the quilt, all finished. After the show, I went home and I finished it up. I got these applique designs from Renee's House of Quilting. She has an AccuQuilt, so she cut out these leaf patterns using the AccuQuilt. I love how using these die cutters give you a really crisp edge. And when you're doing the appliquilting on top, all of those pieces are going to be secured and you're able to add some design in your quilting also. I really hope you like that technique. I've been using it a lot lately. I'm a little obsessed. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. We wouldn't want you to miss a single show. Please share us with your friends and leave a comment. We would really love to hear from you.